Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipsters Curtain Calls, episode 17, Stairway to Heaven, while we are climbing a destined pathway toward a fully tokenized future. This Crypto Hipsters compilation, this Curtain Calls compilation, the 17th episode, is based on 4 podcasts with guests from seasons 6, 7, and 8. The first guest in this podcast is Carlos Balbin, who is a venture partner. Carlos and I spoke in March 2024. Our topic was tokenizing the world, why the future of crypto and blockchain technology is the mass tokenization of real-world assets. The second conversation is with Niklas Kunkel, who's the founder of Chronicle Labs. The Chronicle is the first, before Chainlink, Chronicle was the first Oracle. We talked about in May 2025, season 8, we talked about why the tokenization of real world assets will front run traditional finance. The third conversation was from season 8, but at the very beginning of season 8, before I switched over to video. So this is an audio podcast in September. And Graeme, who was the head of tokenization at Polymesh Association, and I spoke about overcoming the challenges of tokenizing and fractionalizing real world assets. And the fourth conversation was from season 7, was from May 2024. I spoke with Chris Yin, who is the CEO and co-founder of Plume Network. We spoke about how to bring world tokenized assets to the masses. If you haven't guessed, the whole theme of this whole entire compilation, number 17, is real world asset tokenization, its future, and that's why I entitled this episode Stairway to Heaven, why we are climbing a destined pathway toward a fully tokenized future. These podcasts are all available in their entirety on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, YouTube, you name it. The audio versions are also available on iHeartRadio and also YouTube. Sit back, listen, enjoy. Welcome to episode 17 of my compilations from season 6 through 8. Enjoy. Thank you for tuning in.
But in order to fight for the dollar, that means that you have to suppress something, right? And right now, according to your report, only 0.01% of the world population has access to real world asset tokens. How do we drastically improve that number? And what's the path of adoption for the 99.9% of the world going forward?
Yeah, so basically that 0.01%, which looks super slim, doesn't take in count stable coins, right? If we take in count stable coins, that number raised to 11%, right? So basically stable coins are the first use case of real world asset tokenization, right? Basically, I'm taking $1 and I'm representing a real world dollar into a digital form on chain, right? So when I mean 0.1%, I mean like the treasuries, tokenized treasuries. I mean private debt, private equity, real estate, all those. So basically, the people are still not there, right? But I think in the future, in not so distant future, we are gonna get there, right? So people will have the opportunity to invest into opportunities of fractionalized real estate, for example, right? And that exists already off-chain, exists there are several platforms, right? And the competition is fierce, right? But once that happens in crypto, it's gonna be massive because the capabilities that crypto has for provenance, for traceability, for automatic execution. I mean, does not compare with something off chain, right? And this is what basically these consultants have seen, right? That the major opportunity on real world asset tokenization exists in the alternative space, in particularly for high net worth individuals, right? So yeah, so basically, how do we drastically improve that number? Okay, let me think about that. So let me think a little bit about that. So yeah, I mean, of course, again, coming back to the regulatory clarity and compliance, right? It's very important to set clear rules, right? Of what can be done and what cannot be done, right? And how it's supposed to be done, right? And this is something that I got also from Permissionless last year, right? Like the industry were saying like the SEC, when they see a model that is kind of disruptive and they don't like, they pick and choose and they call them to trial or they forbid their operations, right? So that should not exist. Like the law has to be for everybody, right? There is not having a law with name, right? So it has to be a nice playing field for everybody. Everybody knows what to do and know what to do, right? Also, how more else we can improve is with improving the market infrastructure. And I think that is happening, right? Like one of the three main drivers of real world asset tokenization right now are, number one, stable coins. So the more stable coins that we have, the better. Also, bringing other assets different from treasuries, right? Treasuries have been, let's say, following the level of risk, right, of stable coins. Treasuries is the next one, right? What else can you bring? You can bring private debt, right? What else can you bring? Public debt, public equities, and then, of course, private equity too, right? So those are start happenings, but still we are not there into mass adoption, right? Another driver that we can think about to improve adoption is the educational part, right? Because it's because of education or lack of education that retail investors are being scammed, right? At the same time, in the high net worth as alternative space, most of the wealthy individuals, they have interest into diversifying their wealth into alternatives, but only 40 to 50% lack of the knowledge, right? That's very interesting finding from this consulting Bain report that I incorporated in this research, right? So education is also an important driver.
I want to get the first I want to do. I want to get to the current state of oracles, but like maybe that could be embedded in this next question. I want to find out. You said that the DeFi market is going to transform dramatically in the next 12 to 18 months. So I want to find out where we're at today, including the challenges of oracles, and where you think we will be in 18 months, including those solutions to how the challenges of oracles.
So I think, more or less, right, you can kind of consider us from an order of magnitude, right? We're not at millions, we're not at billions, we're not at tens of billions, right? We're in the very low hundreds of billions, right? Doubling or tripling in size, that's not very exciting. And that's what kind of where we're kind of at the limit with injection of kind of small institutional capital. With the introduction of traditional assets, right, we can unlock that $1 trillion order of magnitude. That's what we're looking at here, right? And you can already see it now, right, with how big is the IBIT, the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF. I think it's probably sitting at, I think last time I checked, $80-ish billion, maybe a little bit more. Right, that's from when was this created, right? So there's like the ability to for an asset manager like a a BlackRock, a Fidelity, an Apollo, right? Think of maybe like State Street. They have an incredible amount of assets on their balance sheet, right? And so if they can tokenize these, right, into a uniform kind of container-like format, right, and we get kind of a good regulatory framework around this, right, that gives people trust, that gives agents kind of operating in this space, trust in those assets and the quality of those assets, in the legal standing of those assets, right? Then we're cooking, right? This is and for the first time, and I think in many years, right? It seems like the stars are kind of aligning, both from institutional appetite to public chain, scalability, to the political appetite to create the appropriate regulatory frameworks. Everything is kind of coming together all at once, right? And so this was never a question of if it will happen, right? For years now, this has always been clear that it's going to happen. The only question is when. And really now everything is coming into alignment, and now that it has, these are going to scale fast, right? Like right now, we're talking about billion-dollar tokenized asset issuances. Pretty soon, we'll be talking about 10 billion, right? And after that, 100 billion.
That's why. Yeah, it was a church. It wasn't just real estate, but it was a church that you invested in recently. How does that fit into your mandate, GICCS?
Yeah, so for us, what's exciting about it and how it fits is we want to tokenize every single asset in the whole entire world. And so I'll make sure that I have the caveat there where Polymesh itself is not, quote, tokenizing the real estate. We're not tokenizing any assets. We provide the blockchain so that other folks can do that. And so for the church example, that was One Hope of Colorado Church with Pastor Blake Bush. And so they're working with a company called RE Tokens, stands for real estate tokens. And so they're the ones doing the tokenization. They're advising on the real estate aspects and whatnot. And so for us, it's really just, this is one great real example that people can see in the real world where blockchain actually helps. The thing that everybody loves saying is Bitcoin fixes this. And then, people often have trouble finding real world examples where, okay, well, what is there happening in the rest of the blockchain world? There's lots of dog tokens, there's lots of trading, there's lots of gambling, there's lots of casino applications. But here's an example where you can actually see blockchain through how efficient it can be, through the automation of different aspects in capital markets, through the transparency. It actually makes sense to fractionalize units of real estate and many other assets and have them as tokens on a blockchain rather than pieces of paper that sit in a lawyer or a transfer agent's filing cabinet somewhere.
Yeah, lots of big filing cabinets of companies. So,
yeah, definitely. And that's one of the craziest things. And really, we talked about kind of a logical progression for my career. That was one of the first things that was sort of an aha moment for me when I was thinking about securities on blockchains. And so one of my jobs, this was between third and fourth year university. I worked at a bond fund, and I worked in securities administration, which that's filing cabinet central of the world. And so what I would do every single morning is I would come in, I would print out pieces of paper from what we had in our internal database for how much of a bond we thought we owned. And then I'd print out a piece of paper from a custodian's web portal that said how much they thought we owned of a bond, or what the dividend payment should have been, or the interest payment, or the coupon payment for something. And I would check those numbers, and sometimes they would match and sometimes they wouldn't. And if they didn't match, I would get on the phone and I would call someone and I would say, hey, this number doesn't match. Let's figure out what the correct number is. That just seemed so insane to me, that in the world of the internet, of everything being completely global, of being able to do anything digitally, we were still printing out pieces of paper, calling people to see what the state of the world is. And so with blockchains, the really cool thing is the token is the asset, and the token is also programmable, and the token can do certain things to ensure that everyone is on the same page. If I see a token on the Polymesh blockchain and there's 5 tokens in a wallet, no one can tell me that there should be 5.5 tokens in the wallet, because we can all see there's 5 tokens in the wallet. And so that's one of the really cool things about blockchain that I don't think a lot of people have grasped, just because they haven't worked in capital markets. They haven't seen the back offices that are going through spreadsheets after spreadsheets after spreadsheets, printing out pieces of paper, calling people on the phone to see what's going on, reconciling trades, sometimes weeks, months later. In crypto, the trade is the settlement. The reconciliation doesn't even matter at that point. And so that's some of the really cool stuff that I've been excited about, working with Polymesh and just more broadly with tokenization.
Yep. So where we are regarding collectibles, commodities, and then stocks and bonds as tokenized real world assets, maybe real estate too.
Yep, totally. I think broadly, I agree with you. I think RWAs is actually a very poor articulation of this whole market. And it's a general grouping that that's useful at a very high level, but basically loses all use when you get down to the details, right? And like you said, I group things into kind of 2 big buckets, and there's many sub buckets within there, but 2 big buckets. The first is just physical assets, right? Which are, like you said, collectibles, things like sneakers or Pokemon cards, watches, art, wine, collectibles, whatever it might be. Those types of assets is one group of things that's more physical assets. Then there's a group of non-physical assets, and some of these things are also physical, but the way you sort of deal with them, interact with them, are not, right? So meaning, take stocks, bonds, real estate, any all the other alternative assets or whatever it is, right? Those things you interact with through owning a piece of paper, right? Through title or things like that, versus owning the sneaker itself, right? So they're just 2 different types of things, right? And they share different properties, and the way you need to think about them from a tokenization standpoint also is quite different, right? So for that first group of assets, take physical assets, right? So sneakers, watches, whatever. The primary question with those types of things is, who owns it? Where is it? Is it real? How do I know it's not being screwed with? And do I make sure I can actually get it if I need, right? Am I just trading vapor, right? Is it not real? And do I actually own that sneaker or watch, or is it real? Like, how do I know that it's a thing, right? Because you're ascribing value to that particular asset because it's supposed to be there. It's supposed to be real. So you need to be able to map those things together. So that's the primary challenge with that market, right? You need to make sure that you have a system to identify where this thing is, flash it up to the real world, flash it up into crypto, make sure you have a constant check against this thing, and if anyone wants, they can redeem and reclaim this thing. That's mostly the types of problems when you deal with physical assets and collectibles. On the other side, for non-physical assets, the sort of custody and is it real stuff is a little bit less of a question, right? The house is real, right? We know that the solar farms real, the stocks are real. The question is, and then when you put it into custody, like generally, again, those are fairly safe things. So you're talking about a piece of paper, right? In many ways, or like an entry in a database somewhere. Someone owns XYZ asset, right? The question for those assets is largely less on the custodian side of things. It's mostly on who can buy this, who owns it, and ultimately, when things come down to, because it's regulated or there's some control, right, by a third-party entity, when it comes down to it, do I actually own that thing, You know, do I make sure I can get my hands on it when it comes down to it? Let's say this particular house I own a piece of falls, it goes into foreclosure, and there's a sale, and do I get that money or not, right? How does that actually flow, and how do I make sure I own this thing? And so to me, those are like generally how you bucket those things. They have different problems with each. Both are valuable in their own right, and both are useful in their right. And many of the use cases are related, right? When you talk about taking out a loan on some of these things or putting one of these things up as collateral to take a loan with or whatever, you can use a sneaker or you can use a house, right? And the way it manifests is different. So the way you use these assets is actually similar in many ways, or can be similar, but the way you deal with them from a tokenization angle and the problems are actually quite different. Even if the sort of general workflow is the same, the sort of point of contention for physical assets is, where is this thing? Is it real? And then for the other one, for non-physical, is, okay, I know it's there because it's there, like it's a house, but like, do I actually own this thing? You know, and like, how do I make sure I actually know that I own this asset? And so those are kind of the problems with both. But ultimately, I would say the third dimension is, I think, the audience tends to be quite different, right? Ultimately, right? The people that are buying and trading sneakers and Pokemon cards or whatever are sometimes the same, but often not the same people who are buying, you know, fixed income assets or trading real estate or whatever it might be, right? Maybe they're the same, maybe they're not, but they tend to be a different group of folks. And so understanding who you're going after, what market this is trying to address, like is all part of like how we think about each of these markets, how to categorize. And that's why RWAs in general is a very poor way to describe it, right? Because, you know, in that bucket you have both real estate or like fixed income or private credit, and you also have sneakers and watches and collectibles, which are just very different things, even though sure they're all real to a degree, right? Does that make sense?